I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes talking a little bit about, of course, artificial intelligence, of course, about healthcare, but I'd like to zoom into the reasons why we need this technology in our industry. And look, I'm going to start with sharing a couple of interesting data points. I guess the big problems we have in the healthcare industry and medicine across the globe, I'm sure you're aware of, but maybe you have not seen kind of specific data points around those. So let me start with this. And let's zoom into the first situation we are facing since like a decade or maybe 15, 20 years with like the digital transformation of the healthcare industry, which is the massive data explosion we are facing across healthcare. I mean, have a look to this number. It takes about 72 days to double all medical data worldwide, compared to what you can see 3.5 years in 2010. Also interesting, 30% of the world's data volume is somehow health related. So healthcare, medicine is producing massive amounts of data. But not just data, also information. Information, for instance, healthcare professionals have to consume, have to deal with. As you can see here, every 26 seconds a new medical article is published. If you are a dermatologist, you would need to read 3,900 scientific publications a year to keep up with literature in that space. And if you think that's a lot, I mean, have a look to the next number. If you are a general practitioner or a family doctor, you would need to read for 21 hours each and every day to keep up with primary care literature. Something absolutely impossible, of course. So this is, some of you may know what this is, an X-ray image of the woman's breast, so-called mammogram, which contains more information than the telephone book of New York, even if I don't know if there's still like a physical telephone book. So this is a lower body angiography, which radiology examination, which can easily go up to 3,000 images per case. Think about the massive amounts of images and data, for instance, diagnostic radiologists have to read through each and every day. Another massive number, 50 petabytes of data stored in hospitals. And as I just mentioned, radiologists. On the right-hand side, you can see, on average, in a 12-hour shift, a diagnostic radiologist reads about 50,000 images. Compared to just 500 about 15 years ago. And the reason for this, for instance, is that technology providers such as GE Healthcare, of course, contributing to this, providing better and better medical imaging devices, which can produce thinner and thinner slices of the human body, like MRI, computed tomography, and so on. So massive amounts of data, massive amounts of information. And when you just think about 12 hours and 50,000 images, you will realize that they don't have more than a second to read a single image. So think about all those kind of implications. Actually, 90% of healthcare data is somehow imaging related. Radiology imaging, but not just this, but also pathology, dermatology, ophthalmology, and so on and so forth. So imaging is a huge contributor to this massive data explosion we can see in the healthcare industry. Here just a very long number, right? Like an average, the average number of radiology images stored in like large university hospitals or like hospital chains. This is information that has to be stored for a certain amount of time, for a couple of years usually, but very often does nothing to improve patient outcomes really, or help on like secondary use cases as well. And look, the interesting thing as I talk about these massive data amounts we have to deal with, only 3% of the data we generate in healthcare does something to improve overall patient outcomes. 97% of the data we are generating is unused, unharnessed, unleveraged, and does nothing to improve patient outcomes. And I think this is something where eventually artificial intelligence going forward can also make a difference as well. So what I'm saying here is that we have those massive data we are producing, which to health systems and hospitals today very often is more of a burden, more of a cost today, because they have to store it, they have to maintain it, but the overall value is relatively low. And I believe AI going forward can make a difference to this. If we leverage this data more intelligently, we can turn it from a cost factor or a burden into a real value for healthcare providers as well. I'd like to move on and talk about a completely different topic, switching gears and talking about medical quality. What I show you here is your risk being a passenger on a flight to getting harmed. 1 in a million. So it seems like flying on a plane is relatively safe. When I've seen the comparable number, and this is, by the way, data from the World Health Organization, when I've seen the comparable number of the healthcare industry like a year ago, the first time, I thought this cannot be true, because in healthcare it's just 1 in 10. Means you have a 1 in 10 chance to get harmed during your healthcare journey, whatever harms here specifically means. And this leads to things like that every 10 seconds somebody around the globe dies just because of unsafe care. I think also something where technologies, validated, tested digital technologies such as AI are going to make a difference going forward. Let's move on and talk about something else I'm sure you're very aware of, the pressure clinicians have to deal with each and every day. So first of all, this number, 70% of clinicians seeing now more patients than just a few years back. So the workload is increasing. On the flip side, we see a lot of clinicians also now spending more time in front of their screens, in front of the electronic health record, for instance, instead of spending kind of face time with patients. Back to radiology, as you can see, this is data from the US. About 50% of radiologists are experiencing burnout. In some health systems, we see a 100% staff turnover every 5 years. So massive issues here. On the patient side as well, this is data from Canada. If you are a patient in Canada, you have to wait 13 weeks for your MRI scan. Another data point from the World Health Organization, today we have a shortage of healthcare professionals of about 7 million, and as you can see on the right-hand side, this number is going to increase to 10 million by just 2030. So massive issues in terms of capacity across our health systems. In addition to this, about 30% of healthcare professionals, clinicians, are considering leaving their roles in the next couple of years. And this leads to things like this. You may smile when you see this meme, but in fact it's not that funny. And it's not just this. What we also see, besides the shortage of healthcare professionals, you know this very well, I assume, we have, for instance, in the Western world, aging populations, the rise of chronic disease. So the problem is just getting bigger and bigger. And what I'm talking about here is, I'm not even talking about access to healthcare, right? Staggering 4.5 billion people don't have access to quality healthcare. What I'm talking about is this. We have an increasing gap, an increasing delta between supply and demand, and I think we need to inject as much as possible useful, tested and validated technologies, digital technologies, AI into our health systems to somehow start tackling this growing delta. And look, AI is nothing new in the healthcare industry. We are using this for many years in a variety of different settings and scenarios, quite successfully, especially in the recent years. There have been quite some success stories, such as so-called ambient AI scribes, for instance. But from my perspective, I believe 2025 has really been like a tipping point for AI in healthcare. And I believe so because of two technological capabilities that are available right now. First is what I call multimodal AI, which means now today with so-called foundation models, we are able to not just use AI on a single type of data, such as an X-ray image, and analyze this kind of X-ray image. No, we can feed a variety of different data types to AI or to a set of AI models to make like a meaning out of it. Yeah? So that means going forward, AI will be able to work much more than like a diagnostician does today, having multimodal patient context in mind when making decisions. Yeah? So medicine is inherently multimodal, and this technology AI is also now able to kind of deal with different types of data. The second technology why I believe 2025 is a tipping point is agentic AI. Yeah, so AI agents that in like controlled scenarios, in limited workflows, with human oversight, we can automate specific steps in workflow processes, and I think this will also help us to tackle a variety of the issues I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out there is a reason why the digital transformation of healthcare overall has been slower over the last 15 to 20 years compared to other industries, because we need to be careful. Yeah? Because we need to do everything with caution. We need to make sure all technologies we bring, let's say, to patient care are, again, tested, validated, and do not harm patients. And therefore, especially with artificial intelligence, it's critically important we focus on so-called responsible AI, which means a variety of different things. But this is something we have to start thinking through on day one of AI development, and not just like as an afterthought. And look, where we want to get to is to what you hopefully can see here on my screen. Maybe it's a bit small, but we want to make sure that we find ways to free up time of healthcare professionals, of clinicians, of nurses, so they can spend more valuable time with patients instead of spending time in front of screens. What we need to bring back in healthcare is what I call the human touch, which we somehow have lost over the years as part of this digital transformation of the healthcare industry. And look, I usually compare, when I talk about AI in healthcare, I like to compare it with the images you can see here on screen. On the left-hand side, you can see two glasses of water. The human eye cannot see a difference, but when you use technology such as thermal imaging on the right-hand side, you can clearly spot a difference. Yeah? A glass of hot water, a glass of cold water. And this is like a good explanation of AI as well. If we combine human expertise, human experience with the power and capabilities of technology, we can really just write the sum is better as just one of those two. And again, the focus of AI, and a lot of vendors are here, is primarily how can we support healthcare professionals, clinicians to deliver the best care possible. Thank you so much.